So, welcome back to the Prescription to Travel MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Courtney Downs, and today I'm joined by someone who proves that it's possible to continue to travel even while you're in residency. I have Dr. Dawit Rumicha, emergency medicine resident. He is an expert in points travel, content creator, and he's here to talk about how travel has been able to be a part of his life even still. And he's been able to travel far and wide during one of the busiest and probably one of the most intense seasons of life during a physician's training. So we're diving into how points and miles can unlock real travel opportunities, even on a resident's budget, how to travel smart when time off is limited, and why your spending today can set you up for adventures for tomorrow. So if you've ever thought, I'll travel later, now's not the right time, I don't have enough time, this episode will definitely have you rethinking that. So welcome to the show, DeWitt.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, all. My name is Dawit. Currently, I'm a first year residency out here in New Haven, Connecticut. And essentially, what got me into points and miles, it was kind of non intentional, I would say. Just to kind of start off, I was casually flying, before 2018, and I accumulated some miles in my Delta Sky Miles account. And then from there, ended up booking my first flight using points and miles. I guess kind of the feeling of that and realizing how much money I had saved made me go down the rabbit hole of points and miles and how I could continue to do it. And from there on, just went down the rabbit hole and never been heard from since.
And so what did travel look like for you before that time?
Yeah. So for me, it was mainly family trips that we used to take as a kid. I think that kind of gave me a little bit of a spark in terms of travel and like the different perspectives that you gain from those experiences and those worthwhile experiences that you have along the way. But, that kind of set the tone for everything in terms of, becoming adventurous and doing all the things. And then from there on, worth of just kind of doing it on my own terms and, using points and miles to do that.
And so you're an emergency medicine resident. So points travel is probably a nice little segue into travel when you're living on a resident's budget and working within a resident's timeline.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I mean, what you were saying earlier, with regards to just the time aspect of it, because it's so easy to just postpone, traveling and doing those types of things. But the way I look at it, there's really kind of three determinant factors in, pursuing travel. And that's your time, your health, and, the money and the financial aspect of it. And realistically speaking, I mean, the mantra goes like when you're young, you have everything but the money. In the middle ages, like you have everything but the time. And then your elderly years, you have everything but the health. So there's really no ideal season to make it happen. It's more so having the intention to make it a priority and make it happen because there really is not going to be a perfect season to make it happen.
So true. And I guess I never really thought about it like putting into those, different segments. But yeah, like right now, you've got the financial backing to be able to go. And really, it is just trying to find the time. Like, we're really good health. If you want to go hike Machu Picchu, you can. Whereas, like, 20, 30 years from now, we may not be at that point where we can do those things. But we're like, oh, now we had more time on our hands.
And definitely being in healthcare provides one perspective as well. And it's the element of regret. And in our clinical practice, I would say like one thing that is a pain that we really cannot take away and is something that I've always reflected on is the feeling of regret. So just really living intentionally in the moment that you have and the blessing of the moment and the time that you have.
Right. Well, the time that you have. So, and as a resident, what time do you have?
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. I would say emergency medicine is a very special specialty that really, at least in my mind, emphasizes work-life balance. Being in residency, if I am able to stack a bunch of shifts together and I'll use that to allow myself to have a block of time off towards the end of the month or the end of a block, that's usually what I typically do. And it helps immensely with making these trips happen and making, travel priority. All I need is really 3 days to make something happen, which isn't, in the grand scheme of things, that much time. Especially as an intern, I work 20 shifts a month when I'm in the ED, and then that kind of downtrends as I go throughout. So it's definitely possible, but it takes some finesse.
Yeah, a lot of finesse because I'm thinking back to, residency and I think we did like, 20 to 22 shifts a month. So, there's 30 days in the month. So you've got 8 days to like actually like be off. And so maybe it's different. My husband was living 3 hours away from me at the time, so whenever I had a weekend off, I, like, get off my shift, I'm in my car, and I'm driving down to see him. So maybe I hadn't been driving down to other part of Kansas, I would've been able to, get up and go somewhere a little more exciting. So I guess I could see how you could make it work, but I definitely think it's kudos to you for making it work because it is a challenge because how often do you get off of a shift and just wanna go home and not do anything?
Very, very true. I mean, I would say the excitement of going somewhere new does kind of somewhat fuel me in some way. So, for example, like I may get off an overnight, already have my bag packed, and just get on the first flight out, which it's a lot. It can definitely be a lot, but if it's like a cross country trip, taking the time on the plane to sleep and doing all the things, it ends up, definitely being worth it. Also, in emergency medicine as well, we have the luxury of having not necessarily the most typical schedules. So, for example, I used part of my PTO. So, we get about 4 weeks PTO. I used 1 week to go to Japan. And coming back from Japan, I was on a string of 5 overnights. So, I was already adjusted technically to that time, which helped a lot. So, yeah, it's kind of strategically planning it that way too.
Yeah, and I guess with our sleep schedules being a little off, I think it makes the adjustment a little bit easier,
A little bit, yeah.
or at least you're adjusted to you feel like I've been here before, so, like, when you're used to, like, being sleep deprived, and it's not a good thing, it's not a badge of honor, like, I don't wish it on anyone, but it is, like, a way of life.
Definitely, definitely.
So what kind of trips are you taking that are using points where you can go for, like, 3 or 4 days at a time? Because I wanna know now too.
Yeah. So being in the Northeast, I have access to different airports such as Boston, New York, all of the different major hubs. So really what I do is I'll go into like Google Flights and essentially type in, where I'm starting from and then hit the anywhere button, essentially see what deals and what is out there essentially in terms of places that I could potentially go and kind of like sparking inspiration from there. So typically if I have about 3 to 7 days, that's enough for me to do domestic. A little over 7 days, I can consider, like, Canada, Mexico, things like that. And if it's greater than I think it's around 2 weeks, I can definitely pull off international. I mean, I've done international on less of a time span, but that's usually kinda like my general thought process in making that work.
And so how many trips are you taking a year, do you think?
Oh, geez. Last year was a bit exceptional, I would say, just because it was 4th year of med school, so I had a lot of free time, but within residency, I would say that I've left Connecticut at least once or twice a month. So, that factors out to, I think, about 12 to 15 trips per year is usually where I'm, like, spanning between.
Wow, that's amazing. Where were you in all of your Instagram inspiration when I was, in Connecticut doing medical school?
It's definitely a non-traditional approach, but it's definitely worked out well. I mean, if it wasn't for points and miles, it would not be anywhere near possible to make any of that happen.
What's the feedback from your peers and from, like, the admin and your program directors with you traveling so much? Do you get a lot of pushback, or are they encouraging of your, pursuing things outside of residency?
Yeah. I would say the reason why I ended up ranking my program I'm currently at Yale, I ended up ranking them number 1 because there was such a major focus on work-life balance, so they tend to be very supportive. As long as I get my work done, which is, I do and meet all the requirements I need to, from the education standpoint and also, patient care. At the end of the day, everyone has their own thing that they're into in their lives outside of medicine. And if anything, I think it makes you a better clinician overall because it gives you a mechanism to connect to patients, making medicine a part of your life, not your entire life. I know there's a pressure and mantra, maybe in other specialties where it's more of a focus on medicine being everything. But at least within my program, I would say the culture is very supportive of that. And funny enough, actually, if it was not for the points of my hobby, I don't think I would be at the program I'm at now because way back in my 3rd year of med school, I took a trip down to New Orleans, went to an EM conference, and, flights, hotel, everything was covered by points and miles. If it wasn't for that financial aspect being covered, I wouldn't have went to the conference, met someone from this program, and ended up applying here. So it's just funny how all those things kind of combined together and, made this happen.
Yeah, I wish I'd known about points and miles and had, the foresight to be collecting points so that I could use them on my, like, interviews and, booking flights and all those things, but, like, points and miles didn't even cross my mind until many, many years later. So, I love that you're doing this, and I think other residents and other med students and people who are early in their training can learn a lot from this, so that way they can make smart decisions about having credit cards and using them responsibly, because that's key, right? But once you know that you can use credit cards and you can do it responsibly, it unlocks all these possibilities that you're here to share with us.
Definitely. And I mean, at the end of the day, med school, residency, all the expenses that come from that are there. Those are set expenses that have to be made. But really maximizing the return can really set you up to achieve, your needs, but also your wants as well.
So why don't you tell us about getting started with credit card points and miles? What was your first card, and how did you decide on that card, and some of the redemptions that you made on?
When I first started, I was kind of just going down different rabbit holes of, where to start. And, kind of the simple mindset beginning of it was, I really enjoy flying Delta. So let me get a Delta Sky Miles card. Little did I know about, like, transferable points and currencies and things like that, which is, I learned that from YouTube, like, later down the road. But my first, like, travel card, I would say, was a Delta Sky Miles Gold card. But then, learned about 524 and, Chase's different rules and things like that. So then I started going down the Chase rabbit hole and really, making sure I was maximizing that and then kind of working from there. But I would say for anyone who's just looking to get started, the biggest thing is really strategizing and saying, what are my goals? What is it that I want to do? And what do I want to get out of this? Whether it's, spending time with family and loved ones who may be on the other side of the country, going to that aspirational destination that has always been on the mind, knocking off that thing on the bucket list, all the things, just really having that strategy because there's just so much out there that it's so easy to just get caught up in, all the glitz and glam of this versus that. And it can be tough, but just really staying true to your goals.
Yeah. And so have you been able to successfully convince other residents or med students to hop on the points bandwagon?
It's definitely something that people have heard of, but have different conceptions of. And I think kind of the biggest pushback that I've gotten is more so it's too much work, which I totally understand. I feel like what you get out of this is what you put into it. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Obviously, there's all these tools that are coming about that have made it so much easier to do and find those great redemptions. But it's funny how it kind of parallels medicine, the fact that you kind of really have to be up to date on the latest and greatest in terms of, updates and program, changes and things like that, just as you was like evidence-based practice. And it's just funny how that kind of parallels like that. But it's really just kind of the time commitment aspect of it that seen as been the biggest pushback for people.
Yeah. So what advice do you have someone who's saying, yeah, it's too much work, it's too much time, and they just want to simplify their life? And yeah, they're busy, they've got residency obligations, or, somewhere in their training, or even they're practicing as physicians or doing something that's not even medicine related. And they're just saying, you know what? That's a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, I would say simple is good. I mean, really optimize your strategy towards what it is that you're comfortable doing. Because at the point where it's not something that you enjoy, it's not even worth it at that point. For me, this is a hobby because I enjoy doing it. But everyone has different tolerances and what they're willing to do, with all these different points, currencies, and, all the different values that you could potentially get. Some people may not be into that and just say, I just want a simple cash back card, put it into like, a savings account, let it scale from there, use that for a trip. Totally understandable. Everyone has their own secret sauce of what they do and what they're most comfortable with.
Right. Yeah. And I think I feel the same way. Like, I think we're in great company right now because we both really enjoy using points and miles and really just getting into like, the nitty gritty of like, how do I maximize my points, and make sure that I'm getting like the best redemptions. But there are a lot of people who don't want to invest that much time. Like, I remember back in the day watching like the ultimate couponers, doing all these things. And I'm like, who would spend that much time to like, why do you need that much laundry detergent, and why are you doing all these things to, like, prove that you could only spend, like, $10 in the store and stockpile your, pantry? And I think that's kind of like us within, like, points and miles. Although I think, business class flights are a little more exciting than laundry detergent, but it's the same thing, So which is why I recently started offering, like, points booking services to people because a lot of people don't want the headache of learning all these things and the nuances and, getting somewhere and finding that there's, like, phantom award availability after they've already transferred their points over, all these things that can make your points journey a little discouraging if you're not, prepared for it. So I'm here for people who have the points and just want to spend them. Also to help people who don't have I think we probably did the same thing. We're watching YouTube, we're in all these forums, we're really just digging deep to find out, like, all the little nuances of points and miles, and it's fun for us, but some people just wanna know, "Okay, what card do I get? Which card do I need to have? How do I make sure that I'm earning points?" And then, they're like, "Now that I have the points, what do I do with them?" So, I help people do those things too, and I think as, like, a resident, I didn't know anything about points and miles. I didn't know anything about traveling with I mean, wasn't traveling outside of the US. Like, I'd fly back home and, like I said, I'd drive down to see my husband, but, like, that was the extent of my travel, and I think it didn't even cross my mind because travel is expensive, right?
Right. That's the mindset.
And like you pointed out, you already have all these set expenses that you're gonna have to make anyway, so if you can maximize, the amount that you're earning for those expenses and be able to take a nice vacation. Because I think, like, right now, this is the time in your training, right, where you really appreciate, getting a week away and maybe going, to do some hiking somewhere or, going to a beach and lounging around for a bit.
For sure. Or even connecting with loved ones and doing those things as well, I think are so important.
Yeah, so very cool. So, tell us about some of your favorite redemptions thus far.
So I'd say some of my favorite redemptions, there's 3 that come to mind. One was an economy redemption. It was going from Raleigh, North Carolina to Auckland, New Zealand. Delta had a flash sale for 42,000 sky miles round trip, which was absolutely incredible value. So I made sure to, at least for my mind, whenever I see a flash sale or anything of that sort, I usually just find whatever dates could potentially work and just book it. Don't even think about it, and then just if I need to make changes later, I'll make changes, but just have it locked down. That was definitely one of my favorite redemptions. Next comes to mind was actually another Delta redemption. It was going from the US to South Africa in business class in Delta One. And in order to make this work, it was funny because at the time, if you had started any Delta One redemption from the United States, anywhere, it would be like some exorbitant amount of sky miles, like it was like 400 or 500,000 sky miles. But by positioning to Cancun, Mexico, and starting from there, the price went down to like 90,000 sky miles. So it was a huge discount and just basically went from Cancun to Atlanta, Atlanta to Johannesburg. And that was like 16 hours. And that was a fantastic redemption there.
So before you go, how did you even know to do that though? Like, what made you think was the podcast?
Yeah, it was like, I think Frequent Miler or it was Miles to Memories. It was one of those 2 podcasts where they were talking about it and like the whole Mexico hack that used to be a thing. And that they recently discontinued that or they've just like made adjustments because I think that was a mistake on their part. But there's still a loophole where you can like do that. It's just not, again, just like not within the United States or Mexico or Canada. Like, if you wanted to go from, like, London to Cape Town, you could do that on Virgin Atlantic using Delta Sky Miles for, like, 65,000 Sky Miles. So there's ways to still finesse, just not, that specific way anymore, but it was a great one while it lasted.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. So right now you have lots of options for finding flights like that. Like I'm a big fan of Thrifty Traveler. Like they send out like the text messages and the emails, and so you know exactly when and exactly how to actually book the trips. But know at one point that things like that didn't exist. So the fact that you were able to like take what you heard from a podcast and say, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna book this flight from and I'm gonna fly through Cancun so that way I can, save myself 300,000 points is so amazing.
And flying down to Cancun was only, like, 9,000 Sky Miles, which ended up, again, in total was so much cheaper and more affordable. And also the last one that comes to mind too was going from and this is just kind of like a no basis in terms of, I guess, doing research in the past. I've learned that like for American Airlines, for example, for those like last minute tickets or, within like a week out, they tend to drop a lot of saver space from the United States to Australia, which is a place I like to go to a lot of times. So for example, like I think a week out before go planning to go to Australia, which would stress a lot of people out. I ended up booking my flight because I knew that they would drop a ton of business saver availability. And typically what they would charge going from like anywhere in the US to Sydney in business class would be around like 200 to 450,000 American Airlines miles. But if you wait the very last minute, you'll frequently see them drop like 65,000 AA miles one way to Sydney. And that was one of the redemptions that I took advantage of as well.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions about that too. How do you save up or how do you accumulate so many American Airlines miles? Because they're a little hard to get.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So for me, it is very challenging. So what I typically do is I got the American Airlines, just the City Advantage card, and then also got the business version of that, which covered me for a lot of the things I wanted to do. But also right now, if there's American Airlines business saver space or first class saver space, you can book that using Alaska. And now, because Hawaii and Alaska are merging, you can transfer your American Express membership reward points to Hawaiian and then ultimately to Alaska. So you could book that same business class redemption that I was talking about that was like 65,000, AA points using Alaska miles for like 85,000, which is still a really great deal because they charge like five or $6,000 cash ticket for that same exact route.
And so my next question, getting all the way to Australia and buying a ticket last minute and still being able to coordinate your schedule, how does that work?
Yeah. So again, it's more so like risk tolerance. I usually don't have my accommodations booked for like the first 3 days I'm potentially going to land. And I'll wait until like a week out. Cause just again, like just knowing from like a calculated basis of like what seasonality is like in Australia and knowing how American Airlines typically operates, I can usually like count on with like 90% certainty that they're gonna drop that specific availability. I've done it twice now and I have not had it backfire on me yet.
You're living on the edge.
Exactly. I mean, like, worst comes to worst, I mean, like, I'm more than happy to fly economy. Like, the economy saver space will always be there. So I know, like, if I need to book it, like, I can book it and get where I need to go.
Okay, so do you book anything in advance or do you just wait it out and just see what happens and
Just wait it out. And sometimes if I like know that I have to be there, like, for example, I was a medical volunteer for the Sydney Marathon last year. I had a Delta Airlines like main cabin ticket booked with points, and I could just cancel that and then just book the route that I wanted.
and when you're doing this, are you traveling alone or are you
Yeah, I would say, like, I haven't found the special someone who's, like, as adventurous and as spontaneous and last minute as I am. So it's been a lot of solo travel, but, maybe one day we'll see.
I can imagine what it's like trying to book something last minute like that when you're trying to coordinate, like, with someone else's schedule or, like, somebody else is like, "Oh, yeah, we'll meet you there." And do you do anything that's, like, medically related when you're traveling or anything that's, like, related to your training, or is it mostly just, for leisure?
Yeah, it really depends on the duration of the trip. So, for example, like, I've been to Australia multiple times and, I really love the community down there. I've actually potentially thought of moving down there to practice maybe down the line. We'll see. But, for example, been there multiple times. I have a community down there. So, I feel more ingrained. So therefore, felt like giving back through working the Sydney Marathon as a medical volunteer. I'm actually going back this August to do the same thing again this year, which will be great. And then, like, for example, like South Africa, I was down there for about a month or almost 2 months. So with that being a longer trip, I really got involved with the community for through community outreach to like the local townships, like near Cape Town and did some outreach work there. Just because, again, having the time down there, being able to do the leisure things, but also I feel like, if you're really embracing the community and like really getting the non-touristy experience, it feels really good to, have those outreach experiences and give back.
So, did you worry at all when you started residency that this wasn't going to be possible to continue, or were you pretty confident that this was something that you could do?
Definitely was nervous. I would say that because, fourth year of med school, there was just so much free time. It was just ample. I mean, what I have now is not compared to that, but it's still workable for sure.
And so you are trying to keep the pace with all this travel and you're learning all these things during residency. How do you keep up with like finding all these deals now? Because I imagine your time is spent listening to lectures more so than it is listening to podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, there's again, going back to like what I said about making the time for things and prioritizing things. I mean, there's a lot of time that we don't think about in terms of how we spend it. For example, prime one being social media. So, while a lot of people may be scrolling, Instagram or like TikTok or whatever, I don't even have a TikTok. But, with all those different avenues of using time, for me, I find enjoyment in scrolling for travel deals, like going through Facebook, but like doing it strategically because I'm in a lot of different Facebook groups regarding like airline points and miles deals and things like that. So I guess, like, staying up to date that way, and also even, like, my drives and commutes to different hospitals that we work with, I'll have a podcast on, like, whether it's, miles to memories, things like that, and that really does keep me up to date in terms of things that are constantly changing because things are changing all the time in terms of, like, new credit card offers, devaluations when they happen and things like that. Just staying up to date on those things.
So you mentioned a couple of podcasts that you like to listen to. I'm a fan of Miles to Memories as well. And you said you Facebook groups and other groups that you're involved in. What are some of the ones that you think are notable?
Yeah, like Award Travel 101. There's like one that's called like Black Friday flight deals. It's a very long name, but that's actually how I found out about the flash sale going to New Zealand on Delta. Saw it on there first. And, basically they post a lot of those different types of deals. Like I would say basically just typing in anything related to award travel. I mean, I would say like I'm in I mean 10 to 15 of them. I can definitely send you a list afterward.
And you've mentioned a couple of different cards, and I know, like, in the points community, we really emphasize getting cards that are, like, transferable currencies and using those. Some of the cards that you mentioned aren't transferable currencies, so did you start with the transferable currency card or
Yeah, so, before I knew all the things about transferable currencies and things like that, definitely started with, the Delta Sky Miles Gold Card, but then went to the Chase Sapphire. I think I started with the Reserve actually, and then kind of worked my way from there, building my Chase setup, doing the 524, and then branching out to like Amex and then Capital One as well, being kind of like my three major ecosystems that I work within. Those kind of being the major things. And also, starting to learn a little bit more about builds just because they do have Hyatt as a transfer partner. And I really do value, Hyatt as a transfer partner. It's actually like the main reason I'm still like really heavily focused on Chase is because of they have Hyatt.
all right. So for the people who are listening who aren't really familiar with, like, transferable versus non-transferable currencies, if you have a card that can transfer to multiple different places and it's not linked to one particular hotel or one particular airline, that's considered a transferable currency. So if you have an Amex Platinum card or Amex Gold card or the Business Platinum or you've got the Chase Sapphire Preferred or those cards are transferable currency cards, whereas Delta Amex that you mentioned, people when you ask them if they have Amex, they say, "Yeah, I have a Delta Amex," and the Delta Amex is solely using points for Delta.
Yeah. Definitely. And, I would say transferable currencies protects you from whatever devaluations may happen in a program. So basically, a points price being more expensive and just kind of it gives you more optionality in terms of using your points and miles. I think that's kind of like the biggest pro of having it is because you're really able to protect yourself. Like for example, one of the mistakes I had learned along the way was I remember I got like a United card at some point just because, I was trying to expand out a little bit. And I remember I had a certain amount of points for redemption. I think it was like 80,000 United miles because I knew that was how much you needed to fly Polaris on saver availability. And then just out of nowhere, one day they just raised that up to 100,000 without any warning whatsoever. But because, my points were locked with United, and not with Chase, I was unfortunately affected negatively by that. But it's just things like that, having transferable currencies. I would always recommend just not speculatively transferring your points, just always keeping them and then making sure that you know what redemption you want before you transfer them out.
Yeah, which has been really hard to do lately because I feel like I've missed out on a few really good transfer bonuses and then ended up booking flights through them, and I'm like, "Oh, man, like, I wish I'd done it." But I also have, like, a gazillion points that are locked up in, like, Air France right now that I've been waiting to use, and,
That's the worst feeling.
like, they expire in a year, so I guess I gotta do something, and some points, if they're locked up somewhere, you can keep them going by, like, shopping through the shopping portal, but with Air France, you have to actually, like, book a flight or do something.
Really? I didn't even know that.
You have to do something to actually use them, so I'm like, "Okay, well, maybe I'll just book a flight that's not very far somewhere." But yeah. So the joys of having currencies that are stuck in one place. But I think there is some benefit, like you've mentioned, to having currencies that are specific to, a particular airline or having loyalty to a specific airline. What are some of your favorites of the non-transferable cards or currencies that you use?
Yeah, so I'm still very much a Delta loyalist. I'm currently a platinum medallion with Delta and a Hyatt globalist. So those are like the two main statuses and the two main programs that I focus within. I would say like another program that I'm like starting to love a bit more is definitely Hilton Honors, especially for their free night certificate that you can earn, through spend on their, I think it's their mid-tier card. It's their Surpass card, which I think the annual fee is like 150 now, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, if you spend a certain amount on that card, I think it's like 15,000 in a year, you get a free night certificate, and that free night certificate can be used at any Hilton property, depending on like if they have like the saver availability space, which you can like search on their calendar for. But again, like having the flexibility to do that. And, some of those hotels are going for like $2,000 a night is amazing value.
Right. Yeah. What's your favorite card in your wallet right now?
That's a very good question. I would say if I had to pick one, I know this is a very controversial pick, but I would say the Amex Platinum for Schwab would definitely be my, favorite card just for the lounge access and the amount of money that alone has saved me. And also like things like purchase protection, things like that as well. Of just the customer service from American Express is just phenomenal. I know the annual fee is way up there, but if you're able to maximize the credits out of it, I still truly believe that it is worth it at this current time.
Okay. And you said this is the one through Schwab.
Yeah, the Schwab one. What about you?
How is that different from the normal American Express Platinum card?
So I had the regular American Express Platinum card originally and got rid of that and then got the Schwab one because at the time you could get the sign up bonus on both. So it was advantageous to actually, get one and then get the other one. I would say there really is no pros con other than if you're looking to use your points and then send them over to your Schwab brokerage account. I think it's like a 1.1 cents per point. I've never done it, but it is like the extra feature that you get with the Schwab version that you don't get with the regular version in terms if you're looking to cash out.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think the American Express Business Gold Card has probably been my workhorse for the past couple of months. It's similar to the personal gold. You get 4 times back at restaurants, and then it gives you, like, 4 times back in, like, the 2 categories that are, like, within their categories that you spend the most on. So, gas, groceries is a big thing for me because 'cause I'm always going. And it's been giving, like, huge sign-up bonuses over the past few months, so I've been taking advantage of all those to rebuild my stash of American Express points.
Especially for the lifetime language rules and all the things, the Amex, it's very hard once you've gone through like the main line of cards to get like those large sums. I'm actually working on a business gold bonus right now. I think I got the offer, it was like 200,000 MR points for 10,000 spend. I mean, the 15, there was no way I would do that, but like the 10 was definitely manageable with how much I pay in rent out here in the Northeast. But yeah, no, definitely business gold is a solid pick.
Did you get a Bilt card?
I actually don't have a bill card, so I'm interacting with the bill program through paying rent in their portal because you're able to use an external card now to pay rent and then also get bill points for that. You do get the 3% fee, but earning the sign-up bonus plus earning the bill points, I think it's like 1 point for every $2 for Amex card, and that's 1 point for $1 on every other types of Visa, MasterCard, things like that. In terms of, I guess, like, plus sign-up bonus and everything in terms of scale, like, it really just wipes out the 3% fee.
Awesome. So, I don't think I realized that you can be signed up for Bilt because I'm signed up for Bilt, so I get, like, random points, like, here and there for, like, little things. But you can use any card through Bilt to pay your rent, so you don't necessarily need to have a Bilt card to pay your rent. Bilt card will get you no fee, but you can still just use your Amex Gold to pay your rent.
Right. Definitely, especially if you're working towards those, hotel night certificates and things like that too. You're earning the points for bills, you're earning the points that you'd normally earn on your rewards card and also working towards that free night certificate or whatever like that as well, or sign a bonus. So I think at that point, you're definitely negating that fee by a long shot.
I might have to, like, start prepaying my HOA fees or something through the Built app. Yeah, very cool. So, alright, well, it's been a pleasure talking to you and learning about all these amazing ways to maximize my earning potential and learning all these things about cards that I didn't really appreciate before. So, been very cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like in this hobby, when you talk to people, you just learn so much because everyone has a different strategy, everyone has a different setup, and there's always like bits and chunks that you'll always learn from individuals. And that's why I kind of love the community of Points and Miles is just we're always willing to learn from each other, look out for each other in terms of like what the best redemption may be and just like finding those like hidden gems. And just the community behind it, I think is amazing.
It really is. And do you have any, like, points for people who are just getting started in the points game and, they're beginners and they have, like, no idea where to start? Or maybe they're, early on in their career and they have that one card. What next? What are some resources that they can use to get started without being overwhelmed?
Yeah, I would say, again, just identify those programs that, align with your goals. For example, if you're based out like at New York or I guess Atlanta would be a better example, and like, you fly Delta a lot, like figure out the ways to get those flights for cheaper. Or I'd say a better example actually be Charlotte, because like Charlotte's an American hub. It may be like really expensive to fly American out of a hub just because they have such good market control. But, like, for example, like, learning different ways to get those flights for way cheaper, whether it's, like, looking at Alaska, for example, where it's, like, distance based. So, that American Airlines flight that might cost, like, $400, you could get for 4,500 points because it's within a certain distance band on Alaska. I think, like, learning those, like, little tips and tricks and things like that, and really being willing to expand your knowledge, but also being flexible in terms of destination, time of year, and routing, I think can really, really expand your horizons and get you where you wanna go.
And any parting words for residents or med students who are maybe, early on in their training and are listening to this and saying, that's not really possible for me. Like, how would I even make this work?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the same exact spot. Again, I would just say continue to, you know, do your research, really be an informed consumer, learn all the things that you need to in terms of all these different programs, the rules, and things like that that could best benefit you. I would say like another example that's like very intuitive and I would say like easy to do that a lot of people don't do is like if you check a bag on Delta, it gets in the bell. There's 20 minutes past when you land and the doors open, you get 2,500 miles, like that type of thing. And like for me, with how much I've done, in a year, I've earned like 40,000 sky miles from that alone, that with no spend at all, additional to what I already have. And that covered basically my entire trip to New Zealand. You know what I'm saying? Like there's all these different ways to do things.
That's a lot of points for delayed baggage.
Yeah, it's wild how that ended up working out. But like sometimes it literally is the fact that they don't scan the bag. So it may have been on the belt within 20 minutes. It's just they didn't scan it. So you still get 2,500 miles. Yeah.
So how would you know? Do they automatically deposit that into your account or do you have to, like, keep up with it? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'll go onto, like, Google, type in, like, Delta, like, delayed bags or whatever it is, and it'll be, like, the first link that pops up is, like, the 20-minute guarantee. You put in, like, your name, your SkyMiles number, where you started from, where you ended, and your confirmation number, and basically from there, I just shoot my shot. I don't even time it, and if I get the miles, I get the miles. If I don't, I don't, That type of thing.
So you just put it in and then hope for the best?
Exactly, right? And it's just, like, a nice little top and it's wild because especially if, like, the deals that I do and the deals I take advantage of, I'll get, like, maybe, like, 900 miles from the flight itself in terms of, like, cash redemption, and then I'll get, like, an additional 2,500 from the bag, and the bag will end up being way more than the cash. It's wild how that ends up working out.
Yeah, very cool. Does that work for any other airline?
I think Alaska's the other airline that does it. Theirs is a little more finicky, but yeah, it's Delta and Alaska are the 2 that still do it.
Okay. And so do you post about, like, some of these tips or, like, do you share this information with other people?
I do. So I have like that guide. I think I sent you earlier, and obviously I can share it again as well. In terms of like the most common things that I do, and it was just like a project that I worked on during my layovers because I had a lot of layovers, going from place to place. And I just called it my layover project. And I basically just wrote out all my different tips and tricks. It ended up being like 30 pages. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stop. But, I just say sharing the knowledge that way. I was like coming on podcasts like this and doing things like that. But like, I feel like there's so much content out there And especially with time being such a valuable asset, I feel like I can just direct people to things, but, I don't really necessarily I have the time and luxury to do, like, full on content creation right now. But yeah, always advocate for people to be informed consumers, knowing I know obviously with all the things with like delays and cancellations and things like that, like know which actually are in the rules and knowing how to advocate for yourself because at the end of the day, even airlines and things like that will definitely try to like give you the runaround. But like if you can say like pointing to like this specific rule, this specific regulation helps a lot. And that's actually like how I've won like two different DOT cases that I've had to file with regards to like refunds and things like that. So just knowing how everything works and being informed consumers, I think is like super important.
Yeah, okay, well, you can't leave on that note, so you had to file for refunds through the DOT. How did that work?
Yeah. So, a prime example of this was when I was going from Melbourne, Australia this past year to, it was originally going to go to Raleigh via Los Angeles. And what ended up happening was United on their app tells you like why a flight might be canceled or delayed. And it's like very intuitive that way. So basically, they had a crew shortage in Los Angeles. So the inbound plane never made it out. So therefore, our flight got canceled. And I had to go through the whole process of rebooking and doing all the things. I ended up getting rebooked through San Francisco, then Montana, then to Denver, then to Raleigh. It was like this whole thing. But anyway, I had to spend an extra night in Melbourne, which wasn't the worst thing in the world. But use like find hotels, resorts, like booked a hotel because I knew like the certain rules and regulations regarding cancellations and things that are on United's website. So I was like within like their set amount of things. And I remember I filed, for the refund through United and like wrote them an email, like attached the receipts, all the things. And they said, "Oh, we're not going to cover this. Here's like 10,000 United miles for your troubles." And I was like, that's not going to work because I know the specific rules that are on the DOT's website. So I ended up escalating it, filed like a formal DOT complaint to them. And the DOT basically said, we're fighting in favor of the passenger and you have to give them a full refund. So then I got the full refund after that. And they just sent me a check in the mail. So just like knowing those types of things.
Yeah, I'm like, and I don't even know where you would begin to learn that information. Like, how did you find that? How did you know that that was an option available to you?
So there's a dashboard on the Department of Transportation's website that basically lists all of the carriers within the United States and their specific passenger customer service guarantees and all the things that they as airlines have like put out there like these are the things that we cover in these specific circumstances. Obviously like weather is the one that like universally like nobody really covers for, but like for example, like the crew not showing up for the flight or like them not having enough crew to fly the inbound flight in, that in no way was like out of their control. That was technically within their control. So like per their own, customer care guarantees that they've listed through DOT and on their website, they were not in line with that. And, I had like tangible proof of everything in terms of like, why they said the flight was canceled and everything. And yeah, got the full refund for my additional expenses while in Australia.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Yeah, because I'm like, I wouldn't even think to go to the DOT website. I think I just, just take their word for, okay, well, they can't go when we're stuck here overnight because of X, Y, and Z, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. It's wild how like if you have like saying like point to this specific clause or just knowing these different things, it just goes such a long way. Obviously, like, doing everything with, care and grace and how you act and things like that, and just doing everything in a calm, collected manner, not letting emotions get the best of us and things like that. It just goes such a long way. And having something tangible to point to and being able to be, again, an informed consumer just helps immensely in terms of like navigating these situations because they do come about and, especially like post COVID, a lot of the airline industry, they had like new hires who may not be like up to date on like the most recent policies and things like that. So being able to be an educated consumer and advocate for yourself, it just goes a long way, especially in chaos that may come through travel mishaps.
Yes. Well, being able to be an educated consumer and getting through your residency training, because I'm still in disbelief that you're able to do all these things while you're in, the midst of all these, med school and residency is great. But I love that you are advocating for yourself and that you're also sharing this knowledge with other people so that way we can also be informed consumers. And next time I know that if I'm stuck at the gate and or my flight gets delayed and I'm stuck somewhere overnight, that I have rights.
Exactly. I mean, again, at the end of the day, what fuels all this is my firm belief that like life is short. You got to make the most of the gift that we're given in terms of the time that we have on this earth. And that's what's driven me through doing all of this and continuing to grow and, you know, being able to make those connections along the way, which I just found to be super invaluable.
Well, where can people find you so that way they can be inspired by all of your travels?
So you can find me on Instagram at just_DA_WIT.
I've checked it out and you've had some really nice pictures. Are you a photographer as well?
I'm trying to get into it as a hobby. It's funny enough, in the like most two recent posts, Delta has actually like commented. I was like, "Hey, do you mind if we use this for our marketing materials?" I was like, just like a little hobby that I did on the side. I was like, "There's no way." But yeah, it's definitely something I've been trying to like definitely get into as this kind of a side hobby outside of medicine.
I love to see it and excited to see where life is going to take you, both on a plane and through your career. You're at a program. Is it a 3 year or 4 year program that you're at now?
4 year.
4 year. Okay. Yeah. So as I know, the fourth year will be a lot less grueling and a lot more time for travel. So I'll have to follow along and see how interesting this gets as your paycheck increases and you have more time for like locums and things like that, as can sometimes happen when you're in a program.
Definitely. Less ICU time was always appreciated.
Yeah, yeah.
And also thank you to you as well for creating this podcast and, definitely creating a platform that combines points and miles in medicine, which I feel like is just such a rare combo that you don't see. So I definitely, appreciate you creating in content that you do and really creating this space in order for, like-minded individuals who are into points and miles in medicine to come together.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that, and thank you for being here just because, again, at one point, this was not on my radar, and so I love that, again, that you're in this place in this season of life, and you're still doing all these things, and it's just very encouraging, and I'm sure it's gonna be so inspiring for anyone who's listening, who's in that same predicament or sees himself, "One day I wanna go to med school, I wanna do these things, I still wanna be able to travel, like, how do I maintain my lifestyle and be able to do all these things, throughout it all?" So thanks for being that source of inspiration for someone who's listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Downs. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so again, so whether you're in training or you're working long shifts, whether you're not in medicine at all and you're just someone who has to work and you're just trying to get by just like the rest of us, just like we all are at some point, I hope you can see the beauty of what points and miles can do for your life and being able to enrich your travel and help you achieve your travel goals. So I appreciate you all for being here and listening, and we will see you next time.